I want you to maintain transaction logs. And a transaction log is kind of like a checkbook register on steroids. So I have a separate piece of paper or a separate spreadsheet, depending upon how technical you want to get. And I have one where I track all the deposits. That's all that goes on that list. Any money that I deposit into an account for my principal goes on the transaction log for deposits. I give that transaction a number and I define it with a letter. So D for deposit 1, deposit 2, deposit 3, D3, D4, D5, D6 goes on the transaction log. The first deposit was $1,472.98. It was my mother's Social Security check. I didn't even actually make the deposit. It just came in on my watch automatically because Social Security doesn't like to issue checks anymore. So I deposited. Here's the day I deposited it. My transaction log shows. What was it? It was my Social Security check for the month of November, 2015. Please don't forget the year. These records can go for years. I don't know what the hell November you're talking about when I go back and look at your transaction logs. November 2015, Social Security, this is the amount, this is where I deposited it. This is the date I deposited it on. All that is on my first line of my transaction log. D2 was $42.15. I canceled my father's subscription to Playboy. That was the money I got back from them for the unused portion of the subscription. And I deposited it into this account, and it was a Playboy cancellation of subscription, refund of unused subscription. What bank did it go to? How much went in? On what date? And I keep a copy of the check that I deposited. Why? Because anybody could fill in anything on a transaction log. That's not proof of anything, that anything happened. The rest of the world will assume that you are a liar, that every word that comes out of your mouth is a lie. The same way you assume every word that comes out of your bank's mouth is a lie until they give you a paper statement, and you can reconcile it to the activities in your checkbook and on your ATM card and all that kind of stuff. Did I really go to Starbucks yesterday and get a cup of coffee? Well, yeah, there it is on my statement. It rings true. Okay, I believe the bank. But I don't just believe it because it's on the statement. I believe it because it reconciles to some memory in my life or some entry in my checkbook or some little scrap of paper that I keep in my pocket from Starbucks or some little statement I got from Apple Pay or whatever. It reconciles. So you should do that. Now, suppose I write a check. I'm going to pay money out. I have a separate transaction log for that. P1 for payment. And I list everything that I pay. Who did I pay? How much did I pay? On what day did I pay? Is there a bill I was paying? I keep a copy of the bill. Is there a check I wrote? I keep a copy of the check. Why? Because somebody might ask. And if no matter what I tell them, it's going to be a lie until I produce the paper to show otherwise. That's how I do it. Because anybody could just write stuff down on the transaction log. There has to be something else that substantiates the accuracy of that entry. That's a lot of paper to have to keep track of. But it's an important job that you have, and it's a standard of care that you're held to that you're not expecting to be held to. And by the time you find this out, if you haven't been doing it from the beginning, it's very, very difficult to go back and recreate all of this stuff. So my advice to you is to try and do it as you go. I also keep track of money that I give to my parent, or whoever my principal is. I have a third transaction log that I keep just for that. I gave Dad $50 in cash on this date. And I write down why I gave it to him. And we actually do this. They sign a receipt for it. Dad signs a receipt. Or somebody, if Dad can't sign anything anymore, well, I don't know why the hell I'm giving him cash. What the hell could a guy who can't even sign his own name do with cash? But if for some reason he can't sign his own name, but he still got the cash, I have somebody else who doesn't like me very much sign that they saw me give them the cash. Because again, it's just my word that I gave him the cash. But now I've got a piece of paper signed by the guy I gave it to who said, yeah, I got the cash. And I keep those things. I still balance my checkbook, but I keep those transaction logs. And when I get my bank statement, I make a copy of the bank statement. And I go back on the copy of the bank statement, and next to each transaction listed on the statement, I write down next to that transaction the corresponding number and letter that corresponds to my transaction log. Here's transaction payment 3, P3. I find the statement where that check was recorded on the statement, and I write P3 next to it. So anybody looking at that statement can now go to my transaction log and see the full description and detail of what that was all about. That's a lot of work to do. It's a big, big pain in the butt. But if you really want to do it right, and you never want to get in trouble, that's what you will do. If you don't, at least do it in ways where you can go back and try and create paper trails for how money got spent. The lady I met with today, her parents like to go to the casinos a lot. You know, I probably can't stop them from going to the casino, but I have these ATM withdrawals, and so now I'm trying to contact the tour company that did the casino bus tours to figure out if they have a record of when Mom and Pa Kettle got on the bus and went, and see if I can match that up to an ATM withdrawal at about the same time. So I at least have some evidence of saying, you know what, they went on the bus trips on these particular days, and on these particular days of the same days, here they are at Citizens Bank pulling cash out. What do you think they were doing? They were loading up so they could drive off to some casino somewhere and make somebody rich and come back poor and feel like they had a good time doing it, I guess. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find a tour operator who's going to remember whether Mom and Pa Kettle got on the bus that day. I don't know how well they kept their records, but now I'm relying upon them to help me recreate this stuff, because the guys down at the Medicaid office, which is why we're doing all this, they don't believe a word my lady says, because they don't believe a word anybody says. They certainly don't believe what I say. They want to see some paper. So I'm just trying to throw together paper. And if you think it's time-consuming to prepare your transaction log the way I told you to prepare it, imagine how much time it is to do it the other way. And imagine how much more expensive it is to have the paralegal or the blood-sucking lawyer having to make all these phone calls to all these travel companies and sit around and think in ways, how can I recreate this person's life? Because I have never even met these people. Neither has the caseworker. And I have to be able to convince that caseworker that by the time it's all said and done, she's going to really understand how these people lived financially. If you've never been through it, you can't imagine what I'm talking about. Trust me, this is how I make my living. I have this job because of this process that people have to go through. And Bucknell has a lot of my tuition money as a result. When you do get your bank and brokerage statements and things, reconcile them. If you forget how to balance your checkbook, some statements actually have the instructions for how to balance it on the back of the statement now. But do it. Don't just get it. You can do that with your own money. The vast majority of people don't balance their checkbooks, me included. My wife won't even let me have a checkbook. We got married in law school. She drew a line across my checkbook and said, you cannot ever see one of these things again. I'll give you an allowance, and just like I do with my clients. She told me to sit down, shut up, and when the smart people were done, they would tell me how they'd fixed my problem. So, I'm not trying to exempt myself and say I'm doing this better than you are. And you don't have to do your own checkbook if you want to. But if you're going to be managing your parents' money or somebody else's money, you will balance their checkbook every single time. If you don't want to do that, you don't want the job. Yes, sir. Well, you can say, yes, I moved money over into an account that my parents had access to, and they kind of came and went out of that account. And as long as you're keeping the amount of money that they could possibly screw around with under $500 a month, you'll probably reduce your exposure from a Medicaid standpoint. I can't say if you're going to reduce your exposure for the guy in Denver who's going to fly in and poop on everything. You know, he may want an accounting down to the penny. Yeah, they do with it what they want, but the issue is if you can't account for what they did with it, the assumption is they made a gift. If they made a gift, they don't get Medicaid. See, because they don't want to give you Medicaid. They're looking for a way to trick you so that you don't get Medicaid. Yesterday I went to a Veterans Day luncheon, and the guy who led the SEAL Team 6 team who shot Osama bin Laden and all that, he spoke. You may have seen it in the paper. Interesting guy. But, you know, when he was talking about the training that SEALs go through, he mentioned the fact that during the course of their 8-month training to get into the SEALs, they basically follow these guys around with a little bell. And they tell them how great it's going to be when they quit and ring the bell. All you have to do is ring the bell. It's right here. Reach out and ring the bell. I know you're cold. I know you're hungry. I know you're tired. I know you're hurt. I know you're bleeding and sore. Ring the bell and it'll all be over. Ring the bell. Ring the bell. They always follow you around, giving you an opportunity to quit. And the only guys who get through SEAL training are the guys that never ring the bell. And that's what they want those guys to do. They never quit. He told a story about a guy who actually died in one of their exercises. They had to bring him back. And his first question when they brought him back was, did I pass? And the guy said, yeah, you passed. Because the test was, how far will you go before you quit? Apparently, you'll die before you quit, so you pass. So, you know, to kind of bring this back to what we're talking about, you know, when you're giving people money and all that, Medicaid is giving you the opportunity to screw this up so they don't have to give you Medicaid benefits. They like to tell you there's a program that'll help you, and they like to make it so damn hard to get it that you can't possibly qualify. And this is one of the primary ways that they trip people up, because they know how you maintain your records, and they know how you maintain your parents' records. And so they create rules that allow you to do exactly what you're going to normally do and allow them to then say, oh, I'm sorry, you can't have the benefit we promised you because you didn't follow our rules. And after all, you can do whatever you want to. It's your money. But when it comes to our money, we only give it to people who follow our rules. And the easiest way to follow the rules is to follow these rules. Otherwise, you guys can just start stroking checks for $10,000 a month to the nursing home to pay for your parents' care, because that's who's going to pay for it if you can't, and Medicaid won't. Okay, so this was you don't have this in your utilities, and it's actually too small for you to read, but this would be a typical kind of a statement. And here, over here are my little notations for the different transaction numbers that I have, and I check it off if I've reconciled the statement to my records, so I know it checked out. Check, I was kind of literal about that. And then here are my little transaction notes on that statement. I'm sorry you can't see that, but that's how it's not that hard. It's not rocket science or anything. I'm not asking you to do algebra or, God forbid, trigonometry or calculus here. Just write down on P2, Yeah.
You actually have to keep the paper trail of meaning the receipts, all the receipts.
Yeah.
Reported.
Yep. I keep. Yep. Yep. And I scan it all. I scan everything. I don't want to have 5 years worth of financial records sitting in boxes for people, but I scan it all but I keep it all. The rule is you can't be too detailed. You can only be not detailed enough. You do whatever you want to do. You can do it in many different ways you could accomplish this, I suppose. I just thought this was kind of simple. I was an English major. I don't really want to deal with a whole lot of numbers and stuff. So I became a tax lawyer. So, this way worked for me. You have to have some kind of detailed records of the financial activities that are involved. This would also apply, by the way, to medical decision making. Mom went into the hospital. We found her sitting on the toilet. She'd been there for 3 days. We thought she had a chemical burn. Turns out she just had a rash that got infected, and the infection spread over all of her body. And they took her into the trauma center, and I was presented with, several different options from the doctor about how to treat her. And I chose option 2. Guy comes in from Denver because, hey, mom just got found on the toilet with a body rash they thought was a chemical burn. What did my sister do? Give her, borax to play with or something? This is terrible. She's got dementia, for God's sake. This never should have happened. My sister must be a complete idiot to have ever let this happen. And he wants to know what happened, and he wants to know what you're doing about it. And you're telling him, well, I chose option number 2, but I can't remember what options 1 and 3 were, and I don't remember exactly why, but 2 seemed best at the time. Not good enough for you. Try and take some notes. What was the problem? What were the choices I was given? What choice did I make? What factors did I consider in making that choice? Why did I do what I did? Because you're not going to be asked that question 2 days after you make the decision. You could very easily be asked that question 3 years after you made the decision. I can't remember what I ate for breakfast this morning, much less why I did what I did 2 years ago. And even if it's a major event in your life, like finding your mother in distress on a toilet in her bathroom after sitting there for 3 days because she wouldn't use the medic alert thing that you bought for her 4 months ago, you may still have a hard time remembering why you did what you did, to the satisfaction of your idiot brother, who, of course, is never going to be satisfied because he's using this as the opportunity to wreak upon you the vengeance for all those years as a child when you hid his G.I. Joe under the bed and wouldn't tell him where it was. Kids hold those grudges, and they use these opportunities to fight with one another. Only now the stakes tend to get kind of high.